Going from this photograph to this image, it's not simply about removing color. There's so much more to it. Black and white photography lets us take what the world gives us and create something entirely new, something that existed only in our minds before. For those new to the channel, my name is Adrian. I'm a full-time photographer who embraced black and white over a decade ago and has been making monochrome images exclusively ever since. My goal with this video is to convince you of the benefits of black and white, how it can unlock your creativity, and to share some tips and techniques for making great black and white photographs, both in the field, including some gear, and in post-processing. And speaking of post-processing, I just released an ebook about this titled Creative Black and White Editing in Lightroom. We'll talk more about it later, but if you want to, you can check it out following the link in the description. You might be wondering why black and white, and that's actually a very good question, because in the era of digital photography where color is the default everywhere, choosing to work in black and white can feel almost like an act of resistance, of rebellion. But it's not about being a contrarian for the sake of it. This is a very intentional choice that we make. There are many good reasons to choose monochrome, like the one we are covering today, is that it allows us to be more creative with our photography. I don't know about you, but to my eyes, color feels more real. After all, we see in color. So when we remove it from our images, we are creating an abstraction. We are adding a layer of mystery and making the photographs a bit more ambiguous, less clear. Since black and white is already giving us all of that for free, what if instead of trying to capture the world as it is, we push it farther and create our own version of reality, a parallel universe, if you will? Black and white is a gateway to that alternate reality, something that would be very hard, if not impossible, to achieve with color. We need to learn to see and think in monochrome. For most photographers, black and white is just a second thought. It's something that they try as a last resort to salvage a photo that doesn't really work in color. The thing is that this almost never works, of course. If we want to make great black and white images, this approach is not going to cut it. We need to visualize the final photograph, the final result, even before we press the shutter. This is harder than it sounds because the conversion from color to shades of gray isn't always obvious, especially for the untrained eyes. For example, which do you think is brighter and which is darker? You might think that this one is darker, but in reality both have very similar brightness once converted to black and white. Context matters too. A gray card will appear almost white on a black table, but much darker against a white background. But don't worry if all of this sounds very complicated, because there are some things that we can do to make our lives a little bit easier. Back in the day, photographers like Ansel Adams used some aids in the field to get an idea of what a photograph could look like in black and white. One of those was to take a photo with a Polaroid instant camera using black and white film to get an actual print. This way they could get a very accurate idea of what the tones looked like in black and white. They also used filters. They were called V-Wing filters that minimized the effect of colors. It wasn't truly monochrome, but it worked pretty well. By the way, this is one of the reasons why I liked using a red filter back when I was shooting film with the Bronica years ago, because it gave me kind of a preview in monochrome right in the viewfinder. Luckily for us, things are much easier today. All we need to do is set our camera to black and white preview, so even when we are shooting raw, we can get an idea of what our final image will look like right on our screen and viewfinders. Of course, you can't just walk around with your camera to your eye, although that'd be very cool, but also dangerous. So you need to develop some kind of monochromatic eye to recognize the scenes with potential out there. This is gonna take a little while, but over time you'll learn which conditions, light, shapes, textures make for good black and white photography. But I gotta tell you that even after 10 years of doing this almost daily, I still get surprised very often. So it's important to keep experimenting, studying, and practicing. As you might know by now, one of my favorite techniques, one of my favorite ways to go beyond what reality gives us is long exposure photography. While a regular photograph freezes time, a long exposure captures the passing of time. It creates images that are not visible to the naked eye because no human or animal sees the world that way. A few days ago, I made a long exposure of the Bay Bridge with the downtown San Francisco in the background. A regular shot of this location looks, well, like a photograph. There's no mystery, no room for imagination. Consider the long exposure version now. The lack of detail on the water, there are no waves or ripples to be seen, creates negative space, so all the attention goes to the bridge and the buildings in the background. And then you notice that there are no cars on a bridge with 5 lanes in each direction. That's interesting, isn't it? That's the mystery we are talking about. Or take this other long exposure I made in the Lake District a few months ago. This sculpture is called the 100-Year Stone. I believe it's usually on land, but there was some major flooding at the time I visited the park. And the long exposure made it look like it's buried in sand or snow. Look at this beautiful fjord on the island of Senja in Norway. Again, the long exposure got rid of all the waves and the water and created a perfect mirror of this stunning landscape. You can even go much crazier and go for really long exposures, like this 4-hour exposure I did of the full moon over Mount St. Helens, or this other one, 1.5 hours long, in the south of Portugal in the Algarve. I hope you can see why long exposures are one of my favorite ways to create that alternate reality I've been talking about. This technique does require some special gear though, and that's a tripod, of course, and a set of ND filters. I love my Kase Revolution filters because they are very easy to attach to the lens and take off again, and they are very high quality glass. It's not like my photography requires the highest definition, but I often find myself using 2 or even 3 filters at the same time to be able to take long exposures of up to several minutes in the middle of the day. And when you mount 2 or 3 filters one on top of the other, well, the flaws start to add up. But because the Kase filters are so good, I don't even think anything of using several of them at the same time. Remember, we are not trying to capture reality as it is, but what our mind is imagining of that reality. We need to pay attention to what the light is doing and ask ourselves, how can we leverage this? What can be done here? For example, we see this landscape and immediately imagine how this stream becomes a path for our eyes through the frame. We are walking on this street and visualize an image in which the front of the houses facing the forest are hidden in the shadows. We find these trees and marvel on the shapes, and right away we notice the contrast between them and the grass, even if that wasn't immediately apparent to our eyes. Or we are witnessing a beautiful sunrise or sunset, but we know better, we know how to see beyond the colors of the sky. We know how to recognize the potential of good light to create lines, reveal and hide parts of the landscape and create mystery. As you also know well, I love doing photography in bad weather conditions, and I get that a cold, dark, rainy day is best spent at home enjoying a hot cup of tea. But it's the best moment to make some moody images. I like to embrace fog, snowstorms, even smoke from wildfires, like this photograph I took in the Columbia River Gorge in Oregon, or this one at Mount Rainier National Park in Washington. Both of them were made on very smoky days. Anything that affects the usual atmosphere of a location can make for a great image, like in this photograph that I made in northern Spain under a layer of sand that travel all the way there from the Sahara in Africa. For the same reason, night photography is another great way to capture a different view of a location. I love playing with lights from buildings or cars to engage the viewer's imagination, so they might start wondering and thinking, what is that light in the distance? Is that a car driving down the mountain at night? Where are they going? Where are they coming from? Anything that makes someone stop to pay closer attention to your photograph helps a lot. We can also, if our budget allows for it, use very fast lenses and shoot wide open using that very shallow depth of field that they produce to our advantage. It's very important to not overdo it though. I think it's crucial to add mystery by including some context. There's gotta be some middle ground between revealing all the details by shooting at f11 and blurring out the background to oblivion by shooting at f1.2, right? Being subtle in photography is often the best choice. Don't show everything, don't hide everything, just hint, make the viewer think about what they are looking at, let them imagine things. That way we make them part of the creative process because they are not just consuming an image, they are engaging with it, filling in the blanks with their own thoughts and experiences. In any case, in order to shoot wide open with a fast lens in broad daylight, we might need to use ND filters. In this case, a 3-stop ND filter like this one should be enough for most cases. This is what I use for my 1.4 lenses. There are many other ways we can be creative in the field, like using diffusion filters or special lenses like Holga, Lens Baby, or tilt lenses. The sky is the limit, really. Let me know if you use special gear like this in the comments down below. Our work is not finished the moment we press the shutter. Post-processing is another step in this creative process. Indeed, in order to bring our vision to life, we have to look beyond the basic adjustments like exposure, shadows, or highlights. All of those work wonders, but we want to get our hands dirty with more advanced techniques. We want to use masks for selective adjustments so we can enhance the light we had in the field and draw all the attention to some parts of the frame, probably the subject. I rely heavily on linear and radial gradient masks to darken the edges, the foreground, the sky. We can use curves for very precise tonal control, the step up from global sliders, if you will. Even better is to combine the power of masks and curves to manipulate certain areas of the image with extreme precision. We need to be aware of aesthetic options like adding a vignette or grain. I use both often, the vignette to draw attention to the center of my square compositions and the grain to add some texture to the negative space in the frame and to make my images look a little bit less sharp, less digital. I could be talking for hours about all the things we can do in post-processing. Again, I believe it's a very creative step of the process, and if you want to learn pretty much everything I know about it, you should take a look at my new ebook, Creative Black and White Editing in Lightroom. It's around 100 pages and I cover almost every tool in the software. But most importantly, I show dozens of examples of how to use them in a creative way. Check it out following the link in the description down below. Again, I cannot overstate the importance of experimentation and practice in the field, but also with post-processing. We want to get familiar with our gear, camera, lenses, shooting a wide variety of lighting conditions and locations, and push those raw files in post. If we do this, eventually we'll be able to visualize the final image as soon as we see it out there. It will become second nature and it will happen really fast. You see something that gets your attention, you immediately recognize if there is something there or not, and by the time you put the viewfinder to your eye, you already know the composition you want and the way you will be working on the negative in post. Allow me to use a metaphor here, a writing metaphor. Consider this instruction manual for a controller I got the other day. Technically speaking, everything in this manual is correct. There are no grammar mistakes. It's straightforward, practical, and describes how the controller works accurately. But this is not something you read for enjoyment while sipping your coffee in the morning or late at night in bed before falling asleep. For me, this is the equivalent of a photography snapshot, like the photo I took with my phone in the Isle of Harris in Scotland from the beginning of the video. It was a well-exposed picture, it was straightforward, and it was representative of what the landscape looked like. Now, take something like Beowulf. Not only this book creates an alternate universe of its own, but it also describes it using poetry. While these pages still have the same letters and words that you can find in the controller's manual, they are used in a very different way here. The manual is direct and very clear, while this epic poem pushes the greeting word. It plays with sounds, rhythm, structure to evoke an emotion on the reader. Many times it's the opposite of clear and direct. It's ambiguous, mysterious, and relies on the imagination of whoever is reading it. It's something you definitely read for the joy of reading it, not necessarily to learn a new skill or acquire knowledge, even though many of these old books are filled with wisdom. Anyway, for me, this is the equivalent of a fine art photograph, a beautiful piece with no other goal than capturing and sharing beauty. I hope this metaphor makes sense and it helps putting everything that we talk about in this video in perspective and how and why we want to go from something like the manual, the instructions manual, to an epic poem like this one with art photography. My hope is that this video motivates you to look farther and beyond what we see and try to create something new, try to find what's always been there but it's been hidden. I find that trying to be creative with photography is very fun. It's something that you can do anywhere you are, no matter what you are doing. You don't have to go to any exotic place. I have a lot of fun shooting around here, around the place I live. And don't forget that the key to make good images, no matter if you're trying to be accurate to reality or trying to be more creative, is to just get out as often as possible and practice. I hope you got something useful from this video. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one.